Hey there, good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact character review. Today we're taking a look at our second anemo boy in a row, Kaedera Kazuha. I think there's not much that I need to introduce about Kazuha. We all know Kazuha. He is the absolute staple anemo support that buffs elemental damage and is, next to Venti when it comes to the 5-star anemo boys that are basically essential for everybody's account if you wanna do big boy damage and easily clear Abyss and all of the content. So without further ado, because there's a few things to talk, let's just immediately jump into Kazuha. We'll not really go through his attacks because there's nothing really there. It's just basic sword attacks, nothing to really say. So let's immediately go to his skill. So his skill is called Chihayaburu, and it's interesting how they kept this the name like that because his burst does not have the Japanese name, but Chihayaburu has a press and a hold skill effect. If you press, Kazuha does a light anemo jump, does some anemo damage close to him and pulls enemies slightly in, and then if you hold it, Kazuha kind of, holds up, charges up, does a bigger jump, and this causes Chihayaburu to have a bigger AoE and a bigger pull strength, and deals more damage. Most of the time, while in battle, you'll be using the hold version because of the bigger AoE, bigger pull strength, and the damage, of course. While out exploring, you can tap the skill just to, jump or do some sort of double jump in the air. Yes, this can be activated in the air. Now, when you use Chihayaburu and you hit an enemy, when you plunge attack, you will deal some extra anemo damage, and if you absorb an element while you use Chihayaburu, the hold skill, through Kazuha's first Ascension talent, you will also deal some extra elemental damage based on the type that you absorbed. So this is of course a big thing. This is Kazuha's main form of anemo CC, like it's kind of similar to Sucrose's, pulling ability. Venti's, on another level compared to Kazuha, but this is like a very good skill. The tap and hold version do have a cooldown difference. The tap version is 6 seconds while the hold version is 9 seconds, but this much of a difference, especially in a fight, is not that much noticeable compared to the extra damage that the hold version gives you, and again the AoE. So again, you're most likely gonna be using the hold version, so yeah, that's really that. The extra elemental damage that you deal, because of his first Ascension talent is very nice, and of course this is a very easy way to cause Swirl to activate Viridescent Verener. So yeah, a pretty good skill. It's really, really fun in the overworld where you just do double jumps every now and then, and I really like it. It also helps when climbing. So yeah, pretty good skill. Low cooldown, good damage, just good overall. Moving on to his burst, we have Kazuha Slash. I don't know why, again, they kept the Japanese name for the skill but not the burst, and they named so shit like Kazuha Slash, while you can also translate it to Thousand Leaves Slash, which would have been 1,000 times better, but hey. So Kazuha's burst causes him to do a giant anemo slice and creates this field where this field can absorb an element, and then it will constantly proc Swirl and deal elemental damage as it has absorbed. So it's a pretty good skill. It does take the animation is okay. I sometimes feel that it does last a bit long in the Abyss, so I use my burst with Kazuha and I'm really spamming to switch to another character because again I sometimes feel that it takes a bit long to use, but the AoE is pretty big. There are some times where enemies will run out of the AoE, but it's a pretty good ultimate, deals a fine amount of damage. The initial slash deals a lot of damage, while the extra damage over time that it does with the elemental elemental damage that it does every now and then, it's okay. Duration is okay, 8 seconds, while the cooldown is 15 seconds. So there is, plenty of downtime, but not so much. Energy cost is 60, which is pretty nice, which means that Kazuha has, of course, as he's an anemo unit that needs to constantly be proccing Swirl, so you kind of need a 100% uptime on his ultimate. His ER requirements are kind of high, but this having a 60 energy cost means that in teams that, you know, generate lots of particles anyways, this just, you know, ER requirements go slightly down, and you can very comfortably have Kazuha's burst always up. And this thing, the ultimate, is mostly so that Kazuha can have his second Ascension talent constantly proccing. So whenever Kazuha procs a swirl reaction, this is of course Kazuha's big talent, whenever he causes a swirl reaction, he will grant all of your party members an elemental damage bonus based on his elemental mastery for 8 seconds. So this is a pretty good, this is the great, amazing talent that makes Kazuha who he is. Remember though that the burst will not proc Viridescent Varanner because Kazuha is off the field, so that's kind of annoying, but the big thing is having the elemental damage bonus from Kazuha. So yeah, that's Kazuha's kit. It's really, really good, really nice, really balanced, no stupid energy costs, no dumb cooldowns or anything. The skill alongside the plunge attack generates a nice amount of particles to battery Kazuha himself, and of course the extra particles you'll be getting from swirling and the absorption of elements that Kazuha gets will like really battery Kazuha himself and your other characters. As for constellations, there are some notable ones. His C1 is okay, decreases Chihayaburu's cooldown by a bit, but the big one is that it resets the cooldown of Chihayaburu when you use Kazuha's burst. Now, this does mean that Kazuha gets more field time, which can be detrimental to you if you want your DPS to go in and also not waste the time of Kazuha's burst duration. But I think it's a nice, fun thing to swirl enemies, to group up enemies with Chihayaburu, Kazuha Slash, which does knock enemies a bit away, and then group them back again with the resetted cooldown, which also can help with energy problems or, you know, just energy requirements. You're using your Chihayaburu once until the particles come to Kazuha. You've already used your burst, so that's some energy back, and then you use Chihayaburu again and you gain even more particles. So it can help with energy requirements, but again, it's a fine enough constellation. The big one though is his C2. For a light spender that isn't gonna go for C6, C2 is where you can easily stop and make Kazuha an absolute monster. His C2 makes it so that characters within the Kazuha Slash field gain elemental mastery, so does Kazuha himself. Both your party members gain 200 elemental mastery, and then Kazuha gains 200 himself. Those do not stack on Kazuha though. But it's insane. 200 elemental mastery is very big for Kazuha himself in order to gain even more, give more elemental damage bonus. And of course, your own characters will just deal some good reaction damage through the extra elemental mastery. Or if you have some sort of elemental mastery based character, you know, Tinari, Sino, the upcoming Sino really likes elemental mastery. This is a really big buff for them since, you know, it increases their elemental mastery and they deal more damage with their talents. So C2 Kazuha, an amazing constellation. Pretty worth it, I would say. But it's not necessary to make Kazuha who he is. But it is a really big jump in usefulness for Kazuha. Now, as for artifacts, well, it's Viridescent Varanner. I think we all know this one. Kazuha is a swirl boy, and he needs the extra damage from Viridescent Varanner. The extra swirl damage, like 60%. That's a lot. And then, of course, it's the resistance reduction when you cause swirl, which Kazuha excels at. And you know, there's nothing really to be said about that. You can't really run Kazuha without it. And when it comes to stats, it's all elemental mastery most of the time. Sands, Goblet, and Circlet, all elemental mastery. You can switch up to an energy recharge Sands if you are having some energy problems, or if you're using an elemental mastery focused weapon and you don't have enough energy recharge from your substats. Because of course, Getting elemental mastery goblets or circlets or anything is tough, and having them have energy recharge on the substats, it's also very, very rare. It's even rarer. So if you're having troubles with that, you can use an energy recharge sans that has elemental mastery on it. Of course, your flower and feather should also be maximizing energy recharge and elemental mastery so that Kazuha has as much elemental mastery as he can. If you're trying, your damn best to get Viridescent Verener on him, I would say you can give him some damaging artifacts. You can give him an attack sense. You can give him an anemo damage goblet, and I guess an attack circlet, not really a crit based one, unless you're running something like the Favonius sword. But if until you get all EM on Kazuha, running him with attack focused artifacts with ER or EM below on the substats is okay. But the main thing, of course, is elemental mastery throughout. And as for team compositions, well, Kazuha is everywhere. There's no team that Kazuha doesn't help, right? The elemental damage bonus that he provides is just insane. And also the grouping, of course, with his Chihayaburu is just very valuable. So, really there's no place where Kazuha doesn't fit. Even on a Xiao team, I can see him as a battery, but, not really. But he's just everywhere. Of course, mono Geo teams won't like him, but I don't think I need to mention that. So let's move on to weapons. So, since Kazuha is the Anemo boy with the Elemental Mastery, his weapons are either focusing on more Elemental Mastery to provide an even bigger buff, or it's some sort of energy replenishment, either a weapon that has energy recharge, or provides energy in some way or another. So let's tackle them. As for 3 stars, for super early game, there's not much. There's the Skyrider sword that provides some ER, but there's also the Dark Iron sword that you get if you talk to an NPC in Liyue. Be careful not to consume it when upgrading. It gives EM, and it increases attack when you do some reactions. So it's a pretty good sword, unless you've again gotten rid of it accidentally. The Skyrider sword seems like a good option, but let's go to 4 stars because these are the main ones, and the 5 stars. Favonius sword is a great option for Kazuha. You might need some crit rate substats in order to nicely use Favonius sword and to proc it. But it gives a lot of ER, it has the elemental particle generation, so it's a very good weapon. You, of course, will run an elemental mastery sands of Eon if you're using the Favonius sword. Sacrificial sword is also a decent option. It does have the same problem that Kazuha's own C1 has, where Kazuha will spend more time on the field doing his 2 Chihayaburus. Right, so you might not like Sacrificial Sword. Also, you might have a Zinkshu that needs Sacrificial Sword, but it's still a decent weapon, so because it gives plenty of ER, and the reset on the cooldown means more particle generation. Other than that, there's of course the Iron Sting, the craftable weapon that gives EM. It's a staple for Kazuha because of the EM. You'll be using most likely an ER Sand because you have Iron Sting and its EM. The extra elemental damage thingy the extra damage that it gives you when you deal elemental damage is cool. There's no need to R5 Iron Sting because increasing Kazuha's own DPS isn't really, that important. So R1 Iron Sting is perfect for Kazuha because of the EM that it gives. There's also the Alley Flash, but it gives less EM than Iron Sting, so unless you really don't have any billets and you have, you didn't get to craft an Iron Sting, you can use the Alley Flash. Other than that, Festering Desire does provide some good ER, so it's okay. It's on the same level like Favonius Sword, it's just ER. The extra skill damage and skill crit rate that Festering Desire gives is not that important, so again, it's just fine because of the ER. Other than that, the new Sapwood Blade that came with Sumeru is amazing for Kazuha. It gives a nice amount of ER, and then of course you get the effect where if you trigger a Dendro reaction, which Kazuha can since he infuses his Chihayaburu or his ultimate with an element. Those can proc Dendro reactions, so that means that Kazuha proc the reaction. So you can use Sapwood Blade easily on Kazuha, and then it has the effect where it like generates a thingy, a leaf, where you pick it up and you increase elemental mastery, which can be helpful for Kazuha to pick it, for himself to pick it up, or for a character in your party to pick it up. So amazing. You will need to R5 it since it does increase the elemental mastery that the leaf gives. So it's a bit of a more expensive Iron Sting because it does need a full R5 to be in its best, compared to, again, as we said, Iron Sting being useful just like that, right? Just in R1. Other than that, there is, I guess, the Kazuha story weapon, Kagotsuru Beishin, but it's not for Kazuha. Yes, it's amazing drip for Kazuha, but why the fuck did they give it this effect? Right, it's completely useless, and I don't like it. One weapon that is really good on drip and is good on Kazuha is Amenoma Kageuchi, of course. Amenoma is also more expensive than Iron Sting because you will also need to R5 Amenoma in order to be really useful on Kazuha. But Amenoma offers good drip and also offers the energy generation passive, right? When you use your elemental skill, you gain one of these stacks, and when you use your burst, you consume the stacks to gain energy back. Amazing for Kazuha, first of all. Like, even on one stack where you use your Chihayaburu before you burst, on R5 it's 12 energy back. That reduces the burst cost to 48. That's amazing. It does have a cooldown where you can get each stack every 5 seconds. We've been using this with a C1 Kazuha, and it's amazing. Like, it's seriously amazing. All EM on the artifacts, and Kazuha just never, like, stops having his burst. So if you're looking for a mix of, drip, nice-looking weapons on Kazuha, I would say that Amenoma really fits. Plenty of weapons fit, but, Iron Sting is like a half and half. Like, the Sapwood Blade being so green, you might not like it. Amenoma just really fits. I mean, the attack that it gives is very much useless, but again, it does have an energy generation passive, so it doesn't go completely useless on Kazuha. So I do recommend the Amenoma Kageuchi if you're not using it on another character, and of course if you have the billets to craft it. So that's it really for 4 stars. There is the beta 4-star that is coming. The Zephos' Moonlight. I think this is a gacha weapon from what I know. And it's insane on Kazuha, first of all. It has Elemental Mastery as its substat. And then you gain energy recharge based on your Elemental Mastery. Just absolutely insane on Kazuha, of course. It looks horrendous. I do not like its design, especially on Kazuha, but it's insane. Like, there's nothing bad to be said about this effect on Kazuha. It is a gacha weapon, though. So, compared to other 4 stars, where it's mostly just craftables that are for Kazuha, this is a gacha weapon. So, well, as we know. So it's a good and an amazing weapon on Kazuha, but you're gonna need to be lucky, of course, to get it. But again, insane on Kazuha. So let's move on to 5 stars. There's not that many that fit Kazuha, so let's quickly get over them. Skyward Blade, pretty good. The ER is really nice, right? So, and that's really the big thing, because the effect really doesn't do anything for Kazuha. But if you're not using an Iron Sting, right, you're using something like a Favonius Sword, you can easily switch to Skyward Blade for the extra energy recharge, and that's it. It also looks good. And then really the other one is Freedom Sworn, the tailor-made weapon for Kazuha. It of course gives ZM as the substat, so that's really amazing. And then the effect really mostly helps your team, as when you trigger reactions, your team gets buffs to their normal charge and plunging attacks. And also attack. So yeah, it's really Kazuha's weapon. Is it the best weapon for Kazuha? I think so. It will really buff up your team. For Kazuha's own DPS, it's not really gonna do much, right? Because it isn't an attack, it isn't a damage focused weapon compared to something like even Iron Sting, right, where it gives the elemental damage. But it's again tailor made for Kazuha. So yeah, the EM is amazing, and the effect is really gonna help your team. I will like to see how it performs compared to that Zephos' Moonlight thingy. Like that weapon looks immense on Kazuha. But other than that, the other weapons that remain are damage weapons, and they're just not for Kazuha, right? Like you will increase Kazuha's own DPS, but what's the point in doing that? Kazuha, like you're basically saying, I will lose a total of 20% of my team DPS in order to increase Kazuha by like 5%. So it's not worth it to give Kazuha a damage-based weapon compared to just some sort of EM or ER. Like even 3-star weapons, if it has EM or ER, it's amazing, and that's that. So, and again, Kazuha's best weapons are craftables. So you will most likely find one billet from somewhere while you're traversing Teyvat. So I think that there isn't really much to be said. I think that Kazuha is insanely easy to build. You will go through hell trying to get the Viridescent Varanner artifacts, but when it comes to weapons, it's all good. So then, that's it for Kazuha. He is just so well known, I don't think I need to say that much. There's nothing really specific about team composition that he needs, because he fits everywhere. And when it comes to artifacts, it's all Viridescent Varanner, right? Because that's the big thing. I think that's it for Kazuha. Next up is most likely going to be Tighnari, our first Dendro 5-star, and he is very interesting, and I can't wait to talk about him. So, see you in the next video. Goodbye.